Yeah, me too. I never expected a candy. It was too odd a name.
All right, well, maybe we've got such a nice group to start with. Why don't we get started, because we have Sean here and we want to be able to listen and discuss and have a good time together. So I want to just welcome everyone. My name is Sue Koletsky. I'm the museum director at the Temple Museum of Jewish Art, Religion, and Culture. And I have the honor of doing some wonderful programming, including art talks, which we have pretty much once a month. Today, we're going to be talking to Sean Martin, who's the Associate Curator of Jewish History at the Western Reserve Historical Society. Sean's been there over 15 years. He has wonderful exhibitions that he's curated in the past that many of us have enjoyed. He's written many books that many of us have also read and enjoyed. And he really has all of Jewish history in the Western Reserve at in the pulse of his hand. He's like really a wonderful storyteller and historian. So I want us, in the way that we enjoy these art talks, is for Sean will do a little part of a presentation, of course. At any time that you want, you can either go raise your hand, we'll mute it at the beginning, but we want you to feel like this is a very informal and very engaging program. So anytime you have a question or want to go into more details, please do. We'll also have time at the end of the presentation to bring up some questions that we have. So let's get started. I'm so glad to see all of you. It's a kind of a little grayish day in Cleveland, so this brings some light to us and brings us together. And Sean, I want to introduce you. And I also, of course, want to thank Jen Mendelson, head of operations at the Temple, for putting the Zoom together for us and for making this possible. So, Sean?
Thanks so much, Sue, and thanks, Jen, for all your work in putting this together. It's great to see all of you this afternoon. It is a great day here, so it really is nice to be doing something like this. I will share my screen now and then officially begin. Just give me a moment there. Okay, and okay, so you should see now my first slide here on Jewish art in the Cleveland Jewish Archives. So what you're looking at actually is just an image that we have in our digital repository at the Historical Society on our website. This is, of course, an image of the Cleveland Museum of Art looking on at the temple there. And so I thought, what better image could I find to start this with? Right, it is the temple and it is art, and so this seemed perfect. Let me tell you just a bit about the Historical Society and what we do and how we work. And it's nice to see so many familiar faces here. I know that many of you are familiar with the Historical Society and what we do, but always good to get a reminder and want to tell you about some of the new things that are going on as well. So we are the Western Reserve Historical Society. We are the region's local historical society. I have been in the Jewish archives there since I've been there since 2005. The archives were set up in the mid-70s. And as a historical society, we are many different places at once. So you may know us as the Crawford Auto and Aviation Museum. You may know us as the home of the Euclid Beach Carousel, or as the home of the Research Library, which you see on the bottom right there. In the past few years, we've renamed our site on East Boulevard as the Cleveland History Center. So this is just the name of the location on East Boulevard, which I think most of you are familiar with, but it distinguishes us from our other sites like Hale Farm and Village in Cuyahoga Valley National Park, the Living Heritage Center there. And so that I recommend that when it gets warmer, that you go visit Hale Farm. It's a wonderful place down there. I want to say just a bit more about our research library and a bit more in terms of a general introduction before I speak about art specifically, because we have a lot going on. So the picture that you're looking at the bottom there of our research room, this is, I think, something that many of you will probably recognize from having met with me or having come down to do research on your own. We are a special collections library, and this is the reading room that was opened in the mid-1980s and where people could come and they can do their research. You might have seen just really a week or so ago a major announcement from the Historical Society. The Jack, Joseph, and Morton Mandel Foundation is graciously sponsoring a renovation of this space, this reading room that you see. So the picture that you're looking at actually already no longer exists. We've already just moved out all the furniture and really are in the midst of preparing the space for the construction to start in about a week. So we have a lot going on. It will be a $3 million renovation to the entire first floor of our library building at the Historical Society. And I look forward to welcoming you all in our new space in person sometime in the fall when all of that is possible. A couple other things I should say about what I do and how I work with Sue and the Temple. So my role really is to go out into the community and collect materials related to local Jewish history, process those materials as an archivist, and then do outreach in kind of whatever way makes sense, in public speaking, research and writing, working with the Maltz Museum as well, of course. And we have a close working relationship with the Maltz Museum. One of the ways that I worked with Sue, of course, is on her exhibits that she has put on. The exhibit, Our Shared Garden, on the Hebrew Cultural Garden, we provided some photographic images for that. Several years ago now, there was an exhibit on the rabbi's silver, and we provided some materials for that as well. And the wedding exhibit that is up now features a dress from the Weidenthal family from the costume collections of the Historical Society. So there are all kinds of ways that we work together, and I'm glad to be doing this afternoon with all of you. I thought I would speak about how we use art at the Historical Society, what our collections tell us about art and Jewish art. And so I'll do that first by showing you some things that we have had on exhibit, and then showing you some of the collections that we have that really speak specifically about art, and then finally showing you some examples of Jewish art from the collection. So first, to kind of show you what we have on exhibit, let me tell you first about our website. This is just our website. Available, you can access this from home, wrhs.org, and it will show you that you can research in our research library. You can search the museum collections. You can get to the search collections feature in a few different ways, but this kind of shows you kind of the range of what we do, and that we are a research library, but also, of course, a museum and also a living heritage museum. Okay, so one of the ways that we deal with art is simply by putting it on display. And I want to, here we really are very much using art simply to tell people about local history, to do what we do in terms of our purpose as a historical society. So this is a fun image. I don't know the artist, but this is, of course, Corky and Lenny. And this was a painting that hung at the Corky and Lenny's location on Cedar. And so we had this on display in our reading room until quite recently. And my hope is that we will find a place for it once we reopen. Not exactly what we mean, I think, when we're talking about Jewish art, but I wanted to show you. Likewise, we have another painting here. This was a recent gift that came in through Stuart Pearl in 2017, a painting of his father's, Moses Pearl, the old Cleveland Indians Browns Municipal Stadium. So a wonderful photograph by a wonderful painting by a Jewish artist that we can use for display. And this, you know, I'm a little, I'm trying to think of the right word. I'm a little apologetic because we're not an art museum. We really are a historical society. We have art within our holdings, but we're not, you know, we're not an art museum. So what we can do is we can support people learning about art, and we can preserve what is within our mission to preserve. So what you'll find in our collections are materials about Jewish art and Jewish artists. And when I think of this history of Jewish artists in the city and the region, it seems that it usually starts with the work of William Zorak, who was an immigrant to Cleveland from Lithuania, a painter and a sculptor. Here, I have a few images for you that are just from galleries where the artists have work. And Zorak is an important artist in this history for a couple of different reasons. One, he wrote a memoir and he left behind a lot of information about his own work. And he also worked closely with some of the other artists that I'll mention in just a moment. He started out as someone who worked at Morgan Lithograph, and he actually learned from Archibald Willard. Archibald Willard was an artist whose name you might not recognize, but you would certainly recognize the Spirit of 76, the fife and drums painting that is such a well-known image. So that was someone that William Zorak worked with at Morgan Litho before going on to have his own career as a painter and a sculptor. What we have in terms of William Zorak really is simply copies of his memoir. But we have other materials that will tell us more about Jewish art and artists in the town. And next I'm going to show you what our catalog looks like when we actually go to find these materials. If you go into our website and you search the collections, you can search for whatever terms you like, but the results will appear to you in this form. And because I knew we had this collection, I just went ahead and searched for it. And I'm showing you the entry for the Joseph B. Horowitz papers. I expect that he might be a collector who's known to many of you. Born in 1899, died in 2000. He was born in Vilnius, came to Cleveland at a young age, and then became an entrepreneur, making usable steel from scrap metals. Here he is with his wife, Olin Ali. And we have this photograph because the only thing that we have from this very well-known collector of Judaica and Jewish art is a scrapbook from his 100th birthday celebration. It's a wonderful scrapbook that actually a few scholars have consulted. It is something that has been used. They were collectors who collected really hundreds of items that we can think of as Judaica. This is just an image of a Jewish news article about the collection. The collection was donated to the Klutznick Museum in DC and was there for many years until in 2015, it went to the Skirball Museum at Hebrew Union College. This is just really one way that that researchers can use our collection. They can come and use the collection and find out about Jewish artists, but also about collectors too. Along the same line of learning about Jewish art, I want to show you Ruth Danziker, whom I'm sure is familiar to many of you. I know she is familiar to many of you. I was fortunate enough really to have met her just before I got the position at the Historical Society in 2005. She gave me a wonderful tour of the temple downtown. She was a community activist, a volunteer, a very active member, of course, of the temple. She also wrote 4 different monographs about artists from Cleveland. And she wrote about Samuel Bouquets, whom I'll speak more about in a moment, Philip Seltzer, the Hungarian artist Hermann Kubinyi and his wife Doris Hall, and Edris Eckhart. And she was generous enough to donate her papers to the Historical Society in the 90s. It's a small collection, but it is related to her interest in writing on art, and especially Hermann Kubinyi, the Hungarian artist who grew up in the Bouquets neighborhood. We see that we have a copy of his autobiography here, and then correspondence and photographs related to that research of hers. So she, again, this is a way that it's not the artwork itself, but it is a way that we can learn much more about it from people who collected or did the research on these different topics. So next, I want to tell you just a little bit about Samuel Bouquets. Samuel Bouquets was a Jewish artist born in Philadelphia who came to Cleveland early in his childhood and trained here. He trained at the John Huntington Polytechnic Institute in the late 1920s, and then the Cleveland School of Art in the early 1930s. Like many of these young artists, he went to Europe for a brief period after his study. He returned to the United States before the war and has a show at the Institute of Art in 1940. In this image, which is an image I simply took from Wikipedia, he is painting a mural for the Navy in Washington, D.C. He spends much of his career in Washington, D.C., and he is he's a fascinating figure. He painted in the White House of FDR, and he did much work for the Navy. He even worked in the Department of Plastic Surgery at the Naval Hospital, helping with his use of anatomy, his knowledge of anatomy. And so it really is kind of an interesting story. And he goes on to have a long, important career as well. We do have a painting of his. This is just an image of our of the entry for the painting in our museum collections catalog. So you can see a bit here, just kind of how we describe things and kind of what it is. I don't have the picture to show you. I don't have an image of the painting to show you, but you can tell that it's a landscape of Cleveland, that he was a Cleveland artist. It's a barn sitting up on a knoll. And of course we have the dimensions. One of the nice things about our catalog that's online, while we don't have the images of the objects online, this is something that you at home can access. You can go into our museum collections and you could search for Bouquets, or you could search for Jewish, or you could search for landscapes, and the results would come up and you would be able to see this. And then if you had a serious interest, we would be able to make this available to you. This also tells us that this is our accession number for it. This also tells us that it came in 1972. So it gives us a little bit of information there. Came into our collection in 1972, but the painting we have is from 1935. Okay. Would like to tell you next about another well-known Cleveland Jewish artist, and that is Max Kalisch. This image from the Cleveland Public Library is of him working on a study that becomes the statue of Lincoln that's in front of the Cleveland Board of Education building, now the hotel downstairs, downtown on the mall. Max Kalisch is best known for this sculpture, I think, certainly among residents of the city of Cleveland. This was part of the Lincoln Memorial Commission that had been set up in the 1910s. Rabbi Abba Hillel Silver was involved in that commission. And Kalisch wins the commission, and children all over Cleveland donate their pennies to build the statue. Kalisch is known for much more than this statue of Lincoln, though. He was born in Lithuania in the 1890s, comes to Cleveland with his family, and similarly to in a much earlier period, but just like Samuel Bouquets, he's working during a period of war as well. And his work, also his knowledge of anatomy, his ability to draw, also helped recovering soldiers during World War I. Let's see, I think I have another image for you from him. This is an image of Kalisch, one of his sculptures at the Smithsonian Institution. And then this is an image of one of the holdings of the Cleveland Museum of Art, the breadline from 1926. You may be familiar with a set of his sculptures that are on display at the Maltz Museum. They are part of the core exhibit, An American Story at the Maltz Museum. They are right outside the area that we have the section that focuses on race and racism with the Ku Klux Klan robes. Outside on that wall, you see a collection of Max Kalisch's sculptures. Those are sculptures of workers in the 1920s, just before the Depression. We also have a sculpture of his elsewhere in the Maltz Museum, Rebecca at the Well, that is early in the exhibit. Okay, so I also want to tell you about really, I think, the most important holdings we have when it comes to Jewish art at the Historical Society. And these are the paintings and the papers that are related to the Warsofsky family. Abel Warsofsky and Alexander Warsofsky were the two visual artists in the large family of Ezekiel and Ida Warsofsky. Their brother Samuel was a playwright. The brother David was an insurance agent and a writer. You're looking at an image of Abel Warsofsky here from, again, from the Smithsonian site. The Warsofsky family came to Cleveland from Poland, again, really right around the same time, I believe in the 1880s, 1890s. And, you know, it's interesting, many of these artists of this period, Cleveland's a small town, the Jewish community is fairly small. Several of them know each other, they study in the same places. Abel Warsofsky studied at the Cleveland School of Art, and then the National Academy of Design in New York City. Max Kalish studied with Alexander Warsofsky in New York City. Abel and Alexander have really kind of similar trajectories throughout their life. They study here in Cleveland, and they go to Paris and live for many years in Paris. And then they come to California before the war and finish their careers there. Alexander dies much younger than his brother Abel. Alexander dies in 1845, Abel in 1862. Max Kalish died in 1945, and in 1946, the Cleveland Museum of Art holds a show of the work of Max Kalish and Alexander Warsofsky. And so, like I said, there are many different connections between all of these men. A couple other things that I should mention about the Warsofsky family, and I'll show you some images of their works. Let me see the next slide. Yeah. So this is Abel Warsofsky from the Spelman Gallery. They worked in a style that others have described as classical impressionism. This is an image of another painting of Alexander Warsofsky that is also available, or was available, at the Spelman Gallery. But I want to go back just for a moment to the list of the collections we have at the Historical Society. So we are lucky, thanks to, sorry about that. Thanks to the donations of the papers by the family, we are lucky to have papers related to Abel Warsofsky, to Ezekiel and Ida Warsofsky, the parents of Abel and Alexander, and also the papers of their brother, David Warsofsky. And just a couple other interesting things to mention about the family. Their brother Samuel was a playwright. And in the early 1930s, he writes a play about a woman, about the first woman as president in the 1930s. And in his play, she is the first president, the first woman president to prevent war. And so this is just, you know, kind of an interesting thing from this family of pacifists. And interesting that he conceived of the first woman president in the 1930s, since we are still having issues with that. That is, it's still a real issue. David Warsofsky, I mentioned that he was an insurance agent for his career, but he was very much also a writer and a community leader. He wrote essentially a memoir of his family, but he was also active in the Cleveland Playhouse, supporting Karamu House, supporting the Cocoon Arts Club. He wrote a biography of his brother Abel. And so it really was a family that contributed to the arts in many different ways. So I'm about to conclude, but I just want to make just a few other remarks. What I've shown you today really are simply some of the highlights of the Jewish artists of the region. When it comes to this broader topic of Jewish art and the materials that we have at the Historical Society that tell us about Jewish art, there's a lot that I've left out. So what I've excluded include photographers. I've excluded photographers completely, but they are an important category that we could talk about as well. We have the photographs of Hermann Syde, the photographer for the Cleveland News. Hermann Syde was the brother of Ruth Syde, the author known as Joe Sinclair. He left behind an important photographic legacy related to his career at the press. But also we have an important series of photographs from his travel in Israel as well. We have an important accession from the photographer Herb Asherman with many of his studio portraits of families over the years. And I've also left out many other things that I'm sure I haven't thought of yet. But one important category, of course, is, I would say, support for the arts, for Jewish arts among the community. So we have the records of many of the community organizations, the arts organizations, and we have records from Jewish families and the Federation that would reflect the support of the Jewish community and of Jewish individuals for the Cleveland Museum of Art, the Museum of Contemporary Art, and other institutions. I think one other name that I mentioned in the blurb for this that I gave Sue was the name Dorothy Davis Cates. Dorothy Davis Cates was a community leader, a long career, completely unrelated to art, but she was an important supporter of the Cleveland Center for Contemporary Art. And so when we consider those sorts of materials, then we really do have a fair amount of material that I think would be of interest to all of you with your interests in art and Jewish artists. So I'll conclude my formal remarks now, and I'd be happy to take any questions. I'll go ahead and stop sharing my screen. Thank you so much. We can't hear you, Sue.
Sean, thank you so much. That was terrific. I mean, I learned so many important ways that we can use the museum and really find out a lot more about Jewish artists and your collection. I do want to say that we also in the Temple's collection have several of the artists that you talked about. For instance, we have 18 paintings by Samuel Bouquets. Ruth Danziker was a member of our museum committee and for many years, and she was just a fabulous historian in person. She and I traveled to Washington, D.C. to actually meet with Samuel Bouquets and selected 18 pieces, and then she donated a piece of her own. Those pieces we see all the time at the temple because they're the pieces that are framed that are in the atrium and the social hall. So we get to enjoy, once we're back again, we will get to enjoy those again. So that's from Samuel Bouquets. We also have a Kalish bust of Rabbi Abba Hillel Silver that is absolutely beautiful, that is in the Silver Study, right when you walk in the building, to the right is the Silver Study, of course, and so you can see the bust there of Abba Hillel Silver by Kalish. We have a Alexander Warsofsky painting, a landscape that was donated by Stanley and Hope Edelstein. And we have from Herbert Asherman, his series called 50 Faces of Cleveland Holocaust Survivors. And we have that entire collection, which is very unusual. So it's nice that we're able to feel like we have represented in our collection for us in the community to see some of these artists that are so prominent in the Cleveland art scene. I know that there must be some questions. We wanted to hear a little bit about the Silver Archives as well. And does anyone have some other thoughts of what they want to ask Sean?
Okay, I didn't, okay, this is picky. So when you had your slide up of Abel and Alex Warsofsky,
yes,
you see that you have Alex dying before he's born.
Well, he was a very talented man, but it should be 1945.
Yeah,
yes.
that's what I figured, but double take.
Thank you for that correction. Yes.
That was my comment. I joined the discussion a little late, so I missed it early.
That's okay. That's okay. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
You know, I can certainly, Sue, kind of summarize the Silver Collections as well, if that might be of interest. So, so more typically than artwork, what we collect are what we call manuscript collections, the records and photographs of a family, of an organization, of a business, and those include, I use general terms like materials, but materials of all kinds. So that's correspondence, that's invitations, programs, photographs, sketches. It could be original artwork. It includes oversized materials. It includes audiovisual materials, film, in all formats, from 8-track cassettes to DVDs. And thanks to the Silver family and the Temple, we have the records of both Abba Hillel Silver and Daniel Jeremy Silver. These are large collections, and these are collections that have also been microfilmed. And then really kind of the important thing that I can't stress enough is that if you want to learn more about these collections, you really should go onto our website, go to our online catalog and search for Abba Hillel Silver or Daniel Jeremy Silver. And what will come up are the finding aids to the collection that will show you exactly what we have. These collections are not digitized yet, but the finding aids are extensive and tell you what we have. So for example, when we had the exhibit on the cultural garden, I was able to use the finding aid to find correspondence from Daniel Jeremy Silver to the Temple group, specifically about the garden, because I could find that in the finding aid. Those are really, quite important collections for us, and really within those, within those collections, we will have all of their work to support art and Jewish artists in different ways, connected to the temple or connected to the Museum of Art as well.
Sean?
Yes?
Question, in this digital era where correspondence has gone from those wonderful letters that you might have been given, how do you get your current audience to perhaps think of things in a more permanent way? And then how do you capture those things?
That's a great question. That's a great question. So I'll talk about photographs for just a minute to illustrate, I guess, kind of how difficult that is. So we take literally, I think you're probably doing this as well. We're taking probably, several thousand photographs a year, for example, on our phone, right? Not all of these photographs are good. Not all of these photographs do we think that we will want to keep even for just ourselves, right? But some of these may be photographs that are important photographs, right? We are accepting digital accessions, digital photography, for example, but we are finding that it is a process of educating the public that we don't need everything that they have, that they should still kind of preserve what they are creating digitally, but that also that it takes a lot of work. If you think just, for example, of your own camera roll on your phone, right? We have to literally go in there as individuals, right? And think about what we want to keep and what we want to throw out. We as archivists will really then do the same thing when we receive a collection as well. We are making things available in our digital repository. So far, what we're making available in our digital repository are existing items that we have scanned and that we are then making available to the public. We are not making available yet materials that are born digital, if that makes any sense. But we're starting that process. So I'm not sure if that helped or not, but any other questions or comments along those lines? I know it can be a confusing.
This is not, may I ask a question of both, sure, both Sue and Sean? It seems to me, though I wasn't there at the time, that Dad Silver must have in his collections at the Historical Society information about the works of art in the Maltz Museum that came to the Temple Museum, when works of art that had been stolen by the Nazis that were gathered together and sent out to congregations and to museums. Am I correct about that, Sue? Are there works in the museum, in the Temple Museum collection?
Yes, definitely. Those are called the Jewish Cultural Reconstruction pieces.
Yeah.
So that's the JCR, and we have 70 of them. And they've been meticulously researched as much as we can. We were in touch with Grace Grossman, who's the scholar that really from DC knows most of it, and also with Ariel Weisberg in Stokey. I currently have an intern who's actually working on those to kind of do a catalog of them. Well, and
Sue, am I right that the material in Dad Silver's papers at the Historical Society would include, I see, okay.
So what I did years and years ago is I went down, worked with Sean. He gave me the, we looked at the microfiche of the papers, and you have to literally go through and, keep looking and looking and looking. You're doing research. So I Xeroxed as much as I could find about that correspondence and have that. That'll be part of our catalog. And then everything that is at the Maltz Museum that are the JCR pieces have the label underneath it indicating that they're a JCR piece. So yes, you have a great memory that is true. And those were some of the first pieces that are in the museum from 1950.
Yeah, yes, I was not there yet, but I do think that was the origin of the Temple Museum, and all that written material would be in the Historical Society.
Correct.
Yeah. One of the things that is interesting to me about the Maltz Museum and the Temple, I guess, is just simply how the Maltz is set up in our cooperation, because it really does kind of highlight that there are different institutions that do different things, and the cooperation can kind of work well, right? So at the Historical Society, we collect materials on behalf of the Maltz Museum, and Sue collects materials for the Temple Museum, right? We will often hear from donors that they have something that they think might be of interest. Sometimes it's something that's more appropriate for Sue and the Temple. Sometimes it's something that's more appropriate for me. And that's just kind of the way cooperation works. It's a good thing. So,
very good thing. Yes.
I think Marlene Krause has her hand raised.
I have a question. Yeah. Can I go next?
Sure.
Okay. Hi, Sean, I have a question about the collection by Lou Rosenblum that he donated to the society, and I got a chance to browse in that collection. So I wanted to know, A, has it been digitized? Are you going to digitize that? And are you planning on displaying it in your new remodeled space?
Great questions. So we are stepping up our plans for digitization, but but it's a long task. So we don't have currently plans to digitize the records of the Cleveland Council on Soviet Anti-Semitism. But it certainly, it will be one of the priorities that I would like to have done. So just kind of about digitization, we do have a digital repository. We have about 25 to 30,000 photographs, images that are there. Photographs and documents, mostly photographs. But it's really, it's just a challenge that's beyond us to get anything up there kind of quickly. So we just ask for your patience there. As far as the new space, I'm just not sure what we'll have in terms of display space. But I do expect it to be kind of much more open, much brighter, and it should be good. I'm looking forward to it. So.
I have a question. Can
sure.
I go next? Okay. Hi, Sean. Margie, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I have actually two questions. One that relates to the collection, one that just relates to some of your work. Is there much of either artifacts or papers on Jewish war veterans in the collection? I don't know what form that might take, but I'm wondering.
So yes, we do have several collections related to the different posts for the Jewish war veterans. Yeah, so definitely. We have collections from the Jewish war veterans and also the Jewish war veterans ladies auxiliaries. And it's some good stuff.
I have my father's pocket prayer book and pocket Bible that was given with an introduction by President Roosevelt to all the soldiers. I'm certainly happy to donate that somewhere if it could be of use.
Well, let's be in touch after the call and we can go from there.
Also, because you're there, and I know you've done a lot of work on Jews of Krakow. You've written a book on it, right?
Yeah.
So, and I think you were there in recent years. I am actually curious if there are many Jews in Krakow today.
Oh, so yeah, we're straying far from the topic of Jewish art, but that's fine. So there is a Jewish community center. And there is a small Jewish population. The numbers are completely unreliable. It will be you will hear people say kind of 50 to 100 to maybe a couple hundred or more. What I can tell you though is that the Jewish Community Center is active, that there is also a Jewish preschool, which is kind of what is needed for a Jewish future in the city. And then of course, there are the Jewish monuments, the heritage monuments, the restored synagogues that are very much a part of the Jewish community and a part of what is presented as Jewish history. So, yeah.
Thank you. Do they still have the big Klezmer Festival annually in normal times?
Yes, in normal times. They did have to cancel it this past year. They did something this winter, I think online or something. But yeah, but hopefully we'll be back to normal times.
Ward 9 visited the Jewish JCC in Krakow. And I should also point out that Schindler's factory is located there.
Yes.
And there's a Schindler Museum.
Yep.
Oh, right. Thank you.
I'm happy to talk about Krakow, but let's get Marlene Krause in here. She's had her hand raised.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, well, I just wanted to say to everybody that my mother and I worked very closely with Sean on a project. And it's just kind of another example of something in the Western Reserve collection that people might want to know about. So you're a better talker than I am, Sean.
Well, so this was a diary of poetry, recollections written in Yiddish by, it's the Singer diary. I'm forgetting the relative's first name.
Chaim Singer. He was my great-grandfather.
Thank you. Chaim Singer, Marlene's great-grandfather. Really a wonderful thing from Ireland, from the family with a connection to Ireland. Yeah, so it really is a nice thing. It is on display at the Maltz Museum, and it was also translated. So they were terrific in organizing the translation of that. And so that's on display really in the first case as you go into the art museum.
Yeah. The way I understood it, that was a copy and that you have the original down at the...
Yes, I think that's true. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. The replica is on display. We have the copy in storage.
We just didn't want to find that diary in the bottom of somebody's closet someday and they'll say, what is this? I don't understand it. I'm throwing it out. So that's why we decided to donate it for posterity.
No, it's a terrific item. Really it is. It's a wonderful item to have.
Thank you.
I have to say that I'm very lucky to be able to work with Sean over all of these years. As you can see, there is a lot of overlap, as he said. When something comes to us, I sometimes will call him and say, do you need these documents? They don't really belong, you know, at our museum, and it goes back and forth. I think that Sean has done an amazing job of helping with organize and curate the gallery. Maltz Museum. There are 3 galleries there. One that features the Temple-Tifereth Israel objects, the American Story, which really is all from the Western Reserve Historical Society. It's on loan. And then the Traveling Exhibition Gallery. So there are pieces of art certainly in that gallery as well. And the cooperation between everyone working at the Maltz is, you know, very dynamic part of the Cleveland art scene as well. Are there any other questions for Sean?
Well, so, you know, I would just kind of point out that, I mean, now that I think about it, I mean, there's a lot that I haven't mentioned in kind of in terms of this cooperation. So we have a set of Herb Asherman's 50 Faces photographs as well. That was something that the Maltz put on display, right? There are all kinds of ways in which that cooperation, I think, helps when it comes time for something like a special exhibit on a certain topic, right? That's when it really kind of helps. I'm sure this is a group that's thought a lot about what is Jewish art and what qualifies and what doesn't, right? My first 2 paintings that I showed you, the Corky and Lenny's and the Stadium, right? You know, these are, you know, one is a photograph of a Jewish business and the other is a photograph of the Stadium. You know, it might not be exactly what we think of as Jewish art, but depending on what we're doing, it might be something that is of interest, right? The one is by Moses Pearl, and you have the wonderful painting of the temple on East 105th Street. I love that painting, and I think that's just my favorite. So,
right, and that also was a gift. We got that from the Pearl family, and that's in the Silver Study as well. If anyone on this Zoom has not recently, well, no one recently, but when we get back into the synagogue, make sure that you go into the Silver Study, because there's a beautiful Moses Pearl watercolor painting that's just, you know, vibrant and describes perfectly the scene of the temple during I think that was I think it was the 40s, and he did that piece. And as well as, of course, beautiful portraits of Daniel Silver that was done by Arnold Newman. We were just talking to Adele about that. And of course, the Kalish sculpture. Yeah, makes me miss the temple even more when we're talking about these things. What can I say? Anyone else want to just, Margie, do you want to give a shout out for the Temple Museum Committee? I think you're muted.
Yes, okay, we do have a outstanding committee, about 26 people on it. And during this time of COVID, you know, we've managed to come up with one art talk after another, and some of it was revisiting artists from prior shows. And we had briefly Quarantivity. I think it may still be up, where artists, anybody doing anything, creative, cooking, poetry, art, you know, there was an online exhibition. So, you know, this committee's important. We help Sue. She's our guide and our wonderful leader, but we have input in all the decisions, which is exciting for us. And we really feel so lucky to have such an outstanding Judaica collection in our midst. And thank you, Sean. Very interesting, really.
Well, thank you. I'm glad I could
spend time in the new study center.
Well, you all have to come down then. That would be terrific.
That will be one of our first. We can do that as one of our first group outings. We'll just when we all get together again. Well, thank you all for being here today. If you have any questions or thoughts, you can always email me at skoletzky@tti.org, and I can certainly ask Sean or continue our conversation. We'll be having another Zoom art talk in February with Jane Rothstein, looking at our own archives. We're kind of going down deeper into our archives, but also how we can continue to keep our personal kinds of archives for our families, and how to tend to those so that we can give them to the next generation. So Dor Vador with that. So we'll be getting that to you soon. Everyone stay safe, try to connect with each other, and be good.
Thank you, Sue.
Thank you.
Take care,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Thanks, Sean. Thanks so much.
Great,
Thank you.
great talk.
Thanks, Candy.
Oh my goodness, thanks, Candy.
Candy.
Right. Thank you, Candy. Candy's been so wonderful sending this out, all this information out. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sean. It was much more interesting than I thought it was even going to be, because it was so nice that you told me where to look in the malts for all of those little things that we don't see all the time. And now I will be able to recognize them and talk to them when we go back to doceting. So thank you.
Well, that's what I love about this. It takes a village to do all of these things. Sharing with everyone. That's what it's all about. Thank you, Sean.
And thanks,
Sue.
So it was very interesting.